Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. My name is Jake Baxter. It's been a year since the world as I knew it exploded in my face. Although I suppose it's wrong to say that. The world didn't explode by itself. I blew it up. I ravaged it around me and walked away from the destruction. To be honest, they helped me with this. At least 60 scammers received full payment. I just lit the fuse. My wife was one of those cheaters, and I took perverse pleasure in destroying everyone with her. Before my great awakening, I was a happy, unsuspecting husband, in love with his wife and delighted with our life together. Everything was going great. We had been married for almost 5 years, and we had our own little house with good friends and neighbors that I liked, had a great job and supportive families. We earned more money than we needed to live and saved for the future, which turned out to be completely different than we had planned. I wish I could tell you something about us or our marriage that could make sense of this story. But the truth is, I can't make sense of it myself. I married my college sweetheart. She was sweet, kind, and funny. She was loving and gentle. She wasn't the type to flirt with other men all the time. She didn't dress provocatively, and I never doubted that she was faithful to me. I work in a research and engineering laboratory that develops highly specialized electronics for NASA and the military. We jokingly call it Geek Central. The peculiarity of most geeks is that we do very difficult things at work, but at home we are quite simple. What you see is what we are. There are no tricks here, because we are not good at it. Many people think that geeks are teenagers. Maybe by their standards it is. We laugh at silly jokes, quote films, and little-known works, and we are fascinated by the details of existence. No matter how much sophistication we have, it is not appreciated very highly in social circles. On the other hand, we know that if we lose our reputation for telling the truth, we are finished. Geeks don't lie. Our reputation is our career, and both of them are built on the truth. My wife Jeannie works in high finance at Watson. They are major players in the financial side of large construction projects and seem to have had a hand in many of the largest construction projects in the mid-Atlantic states. The office is located in the city center, and Ginny works with a lot of surprisingly poorly educated people. They understand money, and some of them can program a spreadsheet. But I confess that every time I talk to her colleagues, I feel like I'm back in high school. It's the truth. Jeannie and I had 2 kittens. They were brothers. We wanted to name them Lewis and Clark. One of her colleagues said very seriously, "That's not bad, but you really should name them after someone famous." Do you understand what I mean? They're cool guys, and I'm invisible. Jeannie and her colleagues are always working through all the options, and if it's not written down, it doesn't mean anything to them. I never liked it, but I always thought it was her job, but not her values. God, how wrong I was. Where geeks think individually and come together to test their ideas, financiers think collectively. They identify with the group. The only time they think as individuals is when they are looking for the next step and trying to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't like many of them, but I didn't really hate them until the very end. The first unpleasant feeling I felt was at the Watson Christmas party. It took place at the Marriott Hotel across the street from my wife's office. Everyone was chatting freely, and half the time I didn't know who I was talking to, an employee or their spouse. The booze was pouring out, and somehow by chance, standing at the bar, I heard a woman say to another, "I'll have to pass my working husband before I can do it." It was strange to hear that. I wanted to turn around and see who was talking, but instead I froze. A small voice in my head said, "Stop, listen, don't say anything. Try to become invisible for a moment." "Well, we'll all go on vacation next week, but I think it won't last until then. You know, it's a whole week without crossing the street." Both women laughed. You can always have a little emergency with your account at work. This made them both laugh even harder. What did she mean by crossing the street? Did they think they would have to return to work in the middle of the Christmas party or later? I didn't understand what I heard, but it bothered me. I remember thinking, God, did I really marry the right woman? Whatever they think, it doesn't sound very good. Then I let myself forget about it and went back to the party. I didn't think about it anymore for about the next 3 weeks. On Friday evening, I was walking up the carpeted stairs from our basement when I heard my wife say, "Okay, I'll get right on it. Hey, what's a wife for anyway?" Then she laughed. A wife? What the hell is this? I was turning the corner just as Jeannie was hanging up the phone. "What can all this mean?" I asked. I did everything I could to say it without a hint of accusation. She almost jumped on the spot. I surprised her. "Oh, it was Henry Thomas. It's for work. I have to get to the office tomorrow, and next week we'll be working late. There's an opportunity to collect a financing package for a new residential complex that they are trying to build on J Street." I was reminded of the conversation I overheard at the Christmas party. "It sounds like a little emergency with the bill," I said. Jeannie laughed. "I don't know if I would call this an emergency, but this is too good an opportunity to miss. We've both worked hard this year. I was hoping that we could relax a little this month and spend more time together." "Honey, don't be such a bore. You have to grab onto these things when they present themselves or you'll lose them forever. I'll make it up to you." "And what kind of talk is this about a wife? I thought you were my wife. How many husbands do you have?" A flash of shock flashed across her face. She didn't know I'd heard her. She tried to hide it behind a hasty smile. "Just you, silly. That's how we talk in the office. We team up to work on projects and sometimes joke that we see more of our work partners than husbands and wives at home. It's just our little joke. That's what everyone says." Jeannie sounded confident to the point of condescension. She was smiling, but her hands were shaking. "I'll just stop by tomorrow for a few hours to get the case rolling, and then we'll spend the rest of the weekend together." The rest of Friday evening passed quietly, and Jeannie went to the office on Saturday morning as if it were a normal working day, except for casual clothes. The rest of the weekend together didn't start until after 7 p.m. on Saturday. Don't get me wrong. I understand the hard work and deadlines. I just don't like family secrecy, and I felt like there was a lot more mystery in my marriage than I suspected. That Saturday, I thought a lot about secrecy while I waited for Jeannie to come home. Even though I always told her stories about work or stories I heard at work, I began to realize that she never told me about her job. It was as if she had two lives, one at work, the other at home. I had never realized before how much she had shut herself off from me in this part of her life. When my wife finally came home on Saturday night, she immediately went to the shower and I cooked steaks on the grill. I couldn't stop thinking about that remark in the phone conversation. Wife. Even if it was innocent, it made me bristle. I didn't like it a bit. Two phrases from that Christmas party kept echoing in my head. One was a working man, and the other was crossing the street. Was it literally or figuratively? There were two buildings across the street from Jeannie's office. One of them had a large medical clinic. The other was the Marriott Hotel. It struck me that many people at that Christmas party seemed to be surprisingly well-versed in this hotel. I kept telling myself that they probably went there for lunch and placed visiting clients there. But in my disgusting mood, I kept imagining another scenario. The next week, I decided that I needed to break out of the lab and have lunch in the car. During lunch, my car happened to be parked a block up the street from where my wife worked, and I just happened to have a great view of the street between her office and the Marriott Hotel. I didn't like what I saw. At about 11:45 a.m. on Monday, shortly before lunch, about half a dozen couples, a man and a woman, crossed the street and entered the Marriott Hotel. At about 12:30, I could see the same couples returning to their offices. There wasn't a single group of 3 or 4 women getting together for lunch, just couples. I didn't see my wife among them, but I wasn't happy. I saw the same thing on Tuesday. Different couples, but the same behavior. I knew I couldn't go into the Marriott and watch the lobby. Too many people would recognize me, not least my wife if she saw me there. I needed help. I never in my wildest dreams or nightmares thought that I would do what I did next. That same day, I hired a private investigator named Harvey Madison. I told him what I knew and what I needed to know, and then I gave him a picture of my Jeannie. He told me to do the most impossible thing imaginable. He said, "Don't think about it. Just get back to your life and act normal. It probably doesn't mean anything, and if it's something so unpleasant, you'll find out soon enough." I told him I really hoped I was wasting my money and went back to work. I didn't waste my money. On Thursday morning, Harvey met me in his office to tell me the bad news. My wife walked into the lobby of the Marriott Hotel on Wednesday morning at 11:45 a.m., Henry Thomas's arm around her waist. They stopped at the reception desk just long enough to get the key and went straight up to the 4th floor. They came back almost at 12:40. Harvey Madison had a short and very confidential conversation with the desk clerk. My wife and her working husband were regular visitors to the hotel. Harvey's conversation at the front desk cost me $300, and Harvey warned me that it was just a down payment. I needed hard evidence, and that meant a video recording from inside the room. I hated myself for what I was thinking, but my thoughts about my wife very quickly became quite gloomy. To get what I wanted, the receptionist had to cooperate with us. Harvey needed to know which room Jeannie and her working husband would use. The receptionist then booked the same room immediately before and immediately after their next visit, allowing Harvey to install a small video camera in the room. This meant paying rent and taking a bribe. I could afford it, and I paid. I've had a bad 7 days. I tried to avoid Jeannie as much as possible, but she asked me why I was acting so strangely. I just told her it was because of the job, but I doubt I deceived her. She wanted to make love, and I told myself that if I hadn't caught anything venereal yet, I probably wouldn't. So we did it. My heart wasn't in it. My organ was barely holding up. My only emotions were anger and pain. I felt like my marriage was dying, but I still had very little evidence without any explanation. I knew she was cheating, but I tried to convince myself not to judge definitively until we had a video from the room. I had to see it to be absolutely sure. Harvey called the desk clerk. He booked the right room for next Wednesday morning and evening. I went to Harvey's office on Thursday morning. Now I had the evidence and the accompanying heartbreak. I watched a 40-minute video of my loving wife, the center of my universe, making love to her working husband, Henry Thomas. The world as I knew it has come to an end. The mind of a geek sometimes moves in strange directions. I remembered an old joke about a husband who comes home and finds that his wife is cheating on him. He puts a gun to his head and tells his wife, "Don't laugh, you're next." I promised myself to do everything in the proper order. They will pay, and I will leave satisfied. But before that, I had to leave for a few days. I couldn't be in the same house with Jeannie. I talked to my boss and arranged for the rest of the week off. If anyone asks, I was needed at Wallops all weekend. I went home, packed my bag, left a note, and headed west. I had a childhood friend, David, who lived about an hour away from Baltimore, and he agreed to take me in for the weekend. I considered it a blessing that my paths with Jeannie did not cross while I was at home. I do not know what I would have done, but I was not in the right shape to behave normally. I needed time to think, plan, and most importantly, calm down. After leaving this note, I lied to my wife for the first time. I actually felt awkward about it, but I had to leave and I wasn't going to give up. The trip to the West gave me some time to think. Did I really know this woman? Was she so good at dividing her life into parts that she could rationalize having two husbands? One thing I knew for sure. My wife had confused gullibility with stupidity. I've never been stupid, and lying to a husband who trusts you completely is not a clever trick at all. Now the days of trust are behind us. My marriage was dead and all that was left was a funeral. The peculiarity of childhood friends is that they know you completely. They knew who you were then, who you are now, and what you think about all the time. You can't hide from them. My friend read everything in my face less than 2 minutes after I crossed the threshold of his house. I told him the news, and as good friends should, he got as angry as I did. There was also his wife Marie, who tried to calm us both down and make us think. She wasn't protecting Jeannie in any way. She just wanted me to know exactly what I wanted and not go half crazy. Make no mistake, for a true understanding of what is happening, we need a female point of view. Where I was angry at my wife and her working husband, her attention was focused on all the other women who worked in this office. In her opinion, it is women who control the bed, and every woman there either participated in this by her behavior or turned a blind eye to it. She said, "Men are pigs, and it's up to women to civilize them." She then smiled at her husband, who reluctantly agreed. "I want to destroy them all. I'm divorcing my wife, that lying, cheating scum. She betrayed me, and obviously not for the first time, but I want to hurt them all. I want to make her Mr. Henry Thomas regret that he was born with a male organ, and I want every crook in this office to regret every day they crossed the street to the hotel." Marie tried to reason with me. "Make sure you're prepared for the consequences. There may be a reason for what happened that you don't know about. Maybe she'll regret her actions so much that she'll never do it again. You loved this woman enough to marry her. Do you want to throw it all away now? Think about it." I pulled out the flash drive with the video, and they watched it with me. Henry Thomas was a paper salesman. His job was about money. Where I ran after work, he went to expensive restaurants. Henry Thomas was gentle. For 40 minutes, we watched my wife give herself to her working husband. He didn't last long. He wasn't even particularly energetic. All he did was shove his mediocre organ into my loving wife, and she acted like she was filming a video. The strange thing was that most of the conversation was focused on work. While undressing, they talked about the current project, and later, while getting dressed, they discussed the schedule for the afternoon. As soon as he recovered from a quick first round, she took him on as a rider for the second time. She bounced on his organ like a little girl on a beach ball and screamed just as loudly. The video captured the expression of ecstasy on his face as he finished into my wife. They never used condoms. When the video ended, there was silence in the room. I turned to Marie and asked, "How long should I think about this?" She just shook her head, hugged me, and left to cook dinner. My friend David became a lawyer when he grew up. His wife teaches science in high school. Both have an amazing analytical mindset. We talked a lot that weekend, and with their help, I formulated a plan. I called Harvey and told him exactly what I wanted. It should have cost me dearly, but if I had been patient, it would not have been difficult to do. We decided to divide my wife's office into two groups. There were management and those who worked closely with Jeannie. It was one group of about 10 people plus their working spouses. I didn't just want them to be burned. I wanted them to turn to ashes. The others would have felt the heat, but I didn't spend my money on burning them. Harvey installed video cameras in the rooms of the management and employees he was targeting. The rest would have been captured on video as they entered and exited through the hotel lobby. When I was ready to file for divorce, I simultaneously sued the company and shared what I had with the spouses of each of its employees. I spent a lot of time that weekend wondering if I'd missed the signs. There must have been some signs. She never seemed unloving. She supported me when I described the difficulties at my job. Could she really live two lives without feeling guilty? Was she a sociopath? Her nervous reaction when I asked about the wife remark that first Friday told me that she knew good from evil, or at least knew that her actions could have consequences. I couldn't understand how someone could live two lives without a nervous breakdown. Sometime during the weekend, it occurred to me that by leaving town, I had given Jeannie and her working husband the perfect opportunity to use our house for a date. I thought about it, got angry, and then realized that it didn't matter a bit. I was divorcing her, regardless of her actions now. I'd leave her the damn bed just in case and take what I wanted from the rest. I prepared for the upcoming actions and went home on Sunday evening. To save some money, we decided not to videotape any of the working spouses in their hotel rooms more than once. The exception would be my wife and her Mr. Thomas. This would reduce the cost of booking rooms, and for Harvey's people it would be just 2 hours a day. As for Jeannie, I wanted to stop any claims that it was just one time. It only took 2 weeks to get everything I wanted. I hated those weeks. I know some people will say, wasn't once enough? Of course it was, but I wanted to get back at the whole office, everyone who knew my wife was cheating and didn't tell me anything, and it took a little longer. Most of the working spouses seemed to slip away once a week. Some crossed the street more often, and some perhaps less often. We didn't catch all of them, but enough for my plans. Jeannie and her working husband kept to a schedule every Wednesday. I decided to work late a lot, but it wasn't enough. It was too painful to be at home. I arranged another emergency trip to Wallops on Thursday, but I actually stayed at a hotel near work that night. On Friday evening, I drove west to visit David and Marie again and then stayed at the hotel again on Monday evening. Jeannie started complaining that I was ignoring her, and at least from my side, the relationship turned cold. She had no idea how frosty it was. For some reason, she tried to maintain a normal relationship at home, but I was of little use, and this began to manifest itself in her general behavior. I started sleeping in the guest room and leaving the house early. I could have had my own deadlines at work too. Maybe she thought our marriage was in trouble, or maybe she bought into my excuses, or maybe she just didn't care. In any case, this did not prevent her from having lunch on Wednesdays with her working husband. Anyway, their lunch breaks got longer, and as I found out, at least 2/3 of her company's employees cheated on their spouses, including most of the senior staff. I think it's true what they say about fish rotting from the head. Months later, I realized that in the 3 videos I'd seen, they hadn't mentioned me once. He didn't slander me. She didn't mention me at all, didn't complain about me, and didn't need my protection. She was wearing her wedding rings, which made me even angrier, but it was like I didn't exist. I just wasn't taken into account in this part of her life. There was tenderness between the two partners, but in a strange way, there was no real intimacy. They were more than bedfellows, but less than lovers. I thought my marriage was over that first Wednesday when I saw my wife walking through the lobby, hugging her working husband around the waist and going up to their room. After watching them make love, I realized that there would be no discussions, no excuses, and no cliches. I was ready to ruin my marriage and her entire office with her. I didn't want to listen to her apologies, and I didn't want to see her cry. I sure as hell didn't want to hear that it was just one time. 3 dates, but actually 4, would silence any claims that she loved only me. My lawyer prepared the legal documents, and Harvey prepared everything else. At 10 a.m. on Monday, a special person came into the Watson office to serve Jeannie and Henry Thomas at their desks. Then he entered the CEO's office and served the company. It seems almost ironic now, but Watson's CEO was George Walker, and he was one of the scammers. George Walker was 67 years old, and he had a trophy wife who was only 29. Why would he bother a 45-year-old secretary? I will never understand some people. My mobile phone rang at 10:20 and I turned it off. As soon as the start was made, 5 Harvey operatives began delivering envelopes made of thick paper to the real spouses of each employee of the company. Some had photographs, some had videos, and all of them received detailed reports that could be used in the divorce process. Henry Thomas's wife received a particularly large envelope. Others simply received letters informing them of what was going on in the Watson office, in case they wanted to have a heart-to-heart conversation with their spouses when they returned home. They all received a short note saying, "In the interest of full disclosure, you can thank Jeannie Baxter for bringing this to our attention." I was wondering how many friends my cheating wife would have on Tuesday morning. Watson disappeared almost overnight. My lawsuit against the company was followed by at least 20 more. The divorces spread through the office like a firestorm. Even some marriages in which we have never found evidence of infidelity have not survived. Management tried to fire anyone who was tainted by the scandal, only to face their own involvement in the mess. Those who were innocent left almost as quickly, hoping to preserve their own reputation. The press got wind of the debacle, and 2 weeks later an article about the firm appeared, which featured the phrase "working spouses." I wonder where they got this. I bet it was just some crazy husband who didn't understand how the real world worked. Soon after, the business stopped and the office closed for 2 months. The office building has been empty for almost a year. In the end, I did meet Jeannie at my lawyer's office. She cried a lot. After weeks of angry messages mixed with refusals, pleading requests, and strange attempts at bribery and negotiation, she finally took some responsibility for her situation. She said she immersed herself in the excitement and culture of high finance. I do not know what her colleague had to do with finances, but it was definitely part of the culture. The apology didn't last very long, and in the end, she said it was partly my fault for not discussing my problems with her. Yes, it turns out it was my fault. That's bullshit. You should not remind your spouse not to make love to her working husband. Most importantly, you should not remind your spouse that he should not have a damn working husband at all. I never really understood Jeannie's infidelity, and she never adequately explained it to me. All I know is that she's changed. A clear-eyed and seemingly truthful girl interested in business turned into a two-faced and highly deceitful liar who seemed to live under the slogan, "If he doesn't know, it won't hurt me." Harvey told me that they only got together on Wednesdays during lunch. They didn't use my absence from home that weekend as an opportunity to meet. She seemed to have some strange feeling of a double marriage, which limited her infidelity but did not eliminate it. Harvey tried to explain to me that in his opinion, it was some kind of perverted ritual of rapprochement. Watson had a depraved corporate culture where building a team meant satisfying your colleagues. There was even a kind of perverse fidelity in this game, when employees made love to only one person, and usually it was the one with whom they worked most closely. Harvey thought they believed they were just smarter and superior to everyone else, whether it was a shared secret that led to the risk they shared together, or a distorted social contract I never understood. I wish I could say that I stopped understanding too, but I never stopped caring about my marriage to Jeannie, or the circumstances that led to my divorce from her. I could spend my life trying to understand these people, or I could just walk away. I chose the latter. I got my revenge, but it didn't work out exactly the way I planned. I won my lawsuits, but the company's accounts were empty, and Henry Thomas lost almost everything in the divorce. My own actions have made the company and Thomas unable to pay the lawsuits against them. How do you like this irony? My wife lost her job and demanded alimony when I divorced her. My lawyer argued that her unemployment was a direct result of her infidelity, which led to the divorce, and she did not receive alimony. Even the offended spouses of the scammers resented me for ruining their lives with the unpleasant truth. They seemed to blame me almost as much as they blamed their cheating spouses. It's a big city. I can live without their love, but I did not foresee that this would happen. One injured spouse surprised me more than the others. One evening, Sheila Thomas came up to me in a bar. She was surprisingly attractive, and that should have been more than enough for any man. I was still drinking my first beer. She introduced herself, sat down next to me and put her hand on my crotch. Well, she's got my attention. I'm divorcing my husband, but I want revenge even more. I want to tell him that I slept with his scum's husband. Will you help me do this, Mr. Baxter? How about this, Jake? Will you defile me and help me humiliate the man who satisfied your wife? I wasn't sure what I thought of the word humiliate, but I decided that I would help her, and I did everything in my power, and did exactly that until late at night. I told you that I slept in the guest room for 2 weeks before serving my wife, so I was entitled to some compensation. I came 5 times that night. I felt dehydrated and needed to drink water every hour. When leaving early the next morning, Sheila said she was heading home to rub it on her husband's face. I reminded her that I rubbed it on my face at the beginning of the night, and I would really like to rub it on my face again. She laughed and promised that I would do it soon. Jeannie's family was furious and mad at me for a while, so I sat them down and showed them the video. They cried, apologized, and cried again, but not much. After all, they didn't hold me responsible for the divorce, even though they tried to convince me to give her a second chance. I couldn't. There was no forgiveness in me, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember her asking me to forgive her. She turned my heart to stone, and it stayed that way for over a year. At some point during the divorce, when I was telling my friends at work about what had happened, it occurred to me that all my skills had come to naught when I needed to catch my cheating wife. I'm an expert on high-tech electronics, but she was caught eating a sandwich in a parked car, bribing the receptionist and several miniature video cameras that you can buy online. I also thought about how easy it was to catch them and how easy they could hide it. I overheard 2 conversations and it worked. Everything was in plain sight. Couples crossing the street did not even try to hide their involvement in infidelity. What arrogance! As they say in the suburbs, what would the neighbors think? I mean, people should have known. It's almost a miracle that they got away with it for so long. I began to wonder if the world I live in bears any resemblance to the world around me. Has everyone done this? Where I worked, anyone who called themselves a gambler was unmarried and only dated their right-hand man. And I realized that I was sitting at the geek table again, trying to understand the cool guys. I do see Jeannie on the streets or in the shops from time to time. I don't stop to talk to her, and I don't know what she's doing. When she sees me, she looks like she wants to cry. I never look at her for long. The sight of her still breaks my heart. I turn away, and she knows better than to approach me. I'm not the man she married anymore. The life I knew is gone, and I'm starting over. As I said, I lit the fuse and blew it up. I had no idea that shrapnel would tear my own heart to pieces.